Imagine the scene on that cold January morning in London back in 2018. The streets were busy, the usual city bustle was in full swing, and inside the prestigious Hilton on Park Lane, everything seemed perfectly normal. But behind the door of room 2005, a tragedy was unfolding that would soon shake the music industry to its very core and leave millions of fans in a state of absolute disbelief. When the news finally hit the wires in the mid-afternoon, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Dolores O'Riordan, the woman whose haunting, unmistakable voice had been the soundtrack to countless heartbreaks and political revolutions, was dead at the age of only 46. Can you even wrap your head around that? 46. It's an age where most artists are just hitting their second wind, finding a new maturity in their craft. The world simply stood still. The voice behind Zombie and Linger, a voice that could go from a delicate whisper to a primal scream in a heartbeat, had gone silent. But here's the thing that really gets people, because she wasn't in London for a holiday, or to hide away from the world. She was there to work, she was excited, she was looking toward the future. Reports from those who spoke to her just hours before she was found said she sounded positive, full of life, and genuinely eager for what was next. She was in town for a recording session, specifically to meet the band Bad Wolves in the studio. She was going to provide vocals for their cover of her magnum opus, Zombie. It was meant to be a beautiful bridge between the grunge-soaked 90s and the modern rock era, a celebration of her enduring influence. It was supposed to be a comeback, a triumphant new chapter, not a final tragic goodbye. But instead of her stepping into a vocal booth, the world was forced into a period of mourning that felt incredibly surreal. How does a healthy, legendary singer just disappear? We're talking about a global icon who appeared to be in a good place. There were no flashing red lights, no obvious cries for help in the days leading up to this. When the police arrived at the Hilton, they didn't find a crime scene out of a gritty detective novel. There was no sign of an intruder, no signs of a struggle, and most importantly, no note left behind. There was just an eerie, heavy silence in that room. The breaking news banners on TV were relentless, and on social media, the chaos was absolutely palpable. You had fans from Limerick to Los Angeles sharing clips of her performing, her eyes closed, completely lost in the music. Everyone was blindsided. Was it a sudden health complication? Did her heart just give out? Or was there something much darker lurking behind those hotel doors? Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Initially, the authorities were extremely careful with their words, which only fueled the fire. They used that chilling term, unexplained. It's a word that invites 1,000 different theories. If it wasn't foul play, then what was it? You have to wonder, could there have been a secret struggle we didn't know about? Did the pressures of fame finally take their toll? We saw the rock star, the icon, the rebel. But the walls of that hotel room held secrets that would only come out months later. The world was left in a painful limbo, waiting for a truth that would eventually change everything. Was it a choice, an accident, or something else? Even now, years after that Monday, the shadow of Park Lane looms large. People still debate every detail of her final walk through that lobby. They look for clues in her last lyrics and her last calls. We are just scratching the surface of what was really happening behind the closed door of room 2005. To understand the weight of that silence in room 2005, we have to look closely at the woman who left it behind. Who was Dolores O'Riordan, really? To most of us, she wasn't just a singer, she was a force of nature. With that striking, ever-changing pixie cut and those piercing eyes that seemed to look right through you, she became the face of the Cranberries, and by extension, the global face of Irish rock in the 90s. Think about that unique voice for a second, that haunting, unmistakable Irish lilt that could break your heart into a million tiny pieces and then stitch it back together with a single high note. She didn't just sing lyrics, she lived every single syllable. She was a global icon at a time when the world was absolutely craving something raw, gritty, and authentic. But behind the platinum records and the sold-out stadiums, there was a woman carrying the heavy weight of the world on her shoulders. Her rise to fame was nothing short of meteoric. Imagine being a teenager from a quiet part of Limerick and suddenly finding yourself as the voice of a literal generation. It's a lot to handle, right? The heavy burden of fame is something we often talk about in an abstract way, but for Dolores, it was particularly intense. She wasn't just another pop star churning out factory-made hits. She was a poet for the misunderstood, the lonely, and the angry. Her songs touched on everything from the political unrest in Northern Ireland to the deepest, darkest corners of the human psyche. When you listen to her music, you feel like she's speaking directly to your soul, sharing secrets that she wouldn't tell anyone else. But that level of deep connection comes with a heavy price tag. You really have to wonder, did giving so much of herself to her millions of fans leave her with nothing left for her own peace of mind? Now, let's talk about the juicy details that often get glossed over in those glossy magazine tributes. Dolores was incredibly brave when it came to her personal struggles. She didn't hide behind a PR team or a fake smile. She was open and honest about her battle with bipolar disorder, a diagnosis that she shared with the public later in her life. She spoke candidly about the extreme highs and the devastating lows, the moments where she felt invincible, and the times when the world felt like it was closing in on her. How did this influence her final days? It's a question that still haunts many of her fans to this day. When you're dealing with a mental health condition that fluctuates so wildly, every single day is a battle of its own. As the investigation into her death progressed, more chilling details began to emerge from the scene at the Hilton. It wasn't the typical rock star scene you might expect from a movie. There were no trashed rooms or evidence of a wild, out-of-control party. Instead, the coroner found a more quiet, tragic reality inside room 2005. There were containers of alcohol, specifically champagne and some spirits, alongside her prescription medications. It was a domestic scene that felt painfully ordinary and yet utterly devastating at the same time. The rumor mill was already in high gear before the official report even hit the desks of journalists. Because she had been so candid about her depression and past trauma, many whispered that this was a deliberate act, a final, tragic choice to end her pain. Others speculated that maybe she had a hidden physical illness that had finally caught up with her. The uncertainty was eating everyone alive. But then came the tragic twist that no one really saw coming. The evidence didn't point to a calculated plan or a suicide note. Instead, it painted a picture of a terrible, accidental overlap of circumstances. Dolores was found submerged in the bathtub. The official findings revealed that she had therapeutic levels of her medication in her system, but combined with the high levels of alcohol, it created what experts call a lethal cocktail. It wasn't that she had taken a massive overdose of her medicine, it was simply the way the alcohol interacted with it, causing her to lose consciousness while in the water. It's the kind of freak accident that makes you realize how fragile life truly is. One minute you're making exciting plans for the studio, and the next, a series of small, unfortunate choices leads to a permanent end. Was it really just a tragic accident, a moment of relaxation gone horribly wrong, or was there a deeper, silent cry for help that everyone around her missed? The mystery of her final moments continues to linger like the lyrics of her most famous songs. When the coroner finally stepped forward to deliver the official verdict, the phrase "death by misadventure" echoed through the newsrooms like a heavy bell. What does that mean? It's the tragic middle ground between a total accident and a choice. It tells us that while Dolores didn't intend to end her life that night, her actions, drinking while on her prescribed medication, led to a fatal outcome she never saw coming. It's a clinical way of describing a heartbreakingly human mistake. For fans looking for a conspiracy, the reality was harder to swallow because it was so mundane. A legend lost to a bathtub and a few drinks. Can you even imagine the weight of that realization for her family? The news hit her bandmates like a physical blow. Noel, Mike, and Fergal weren't just guys she played music with, they were her brothers. They had grown up together in the spotlight and supported each other through every hiatus and reunion. Their public statements were gut-wrenching. They spoke of a sister they had lost, a light extinguished too soon. For them, the verdict didn't change the magnitude of the massive hole she left behind. They were a family unit, a quartet soul, and now that family was missing its heartbeat. It really makes you wonder how they found the strength to keep her memory alive while dealing with such profound grief. They became the guardians of her legacy while their own hearts were in pieces. Then there's the eerie connection to the band Bad Wolves. On the day she was found, Dolores was actually scheduled to head into a London recording studio to provide guest vocals for their cover of Zombie. The band members were sitting there, waiting for her to walk through the door. They had the tracks lined up and ready. When the news of her death broke, that recording session instantly turned into a wake. Instead of a collaboration, their version became a haunting tribute. When they released it, they donated the proceeds to her children. It was a beautiful gesture that served as a final, unintentional gift from Dolores to her family. Isn't it wild how fate works? One moment you're about to create, and the next, you're a memory the world is trying to process. Even after the official report, the internet speculated wildly. Social media was flooded with theories from people who couldn't accept the accidental narrative. Some conspiracy theorists claimed the industry did it, pointing to her past struggles as a reason. Why is it so difficult to accept a simple accident when it comes to our idols? Maybe we want our icons to have endings that match the epic drama of their lives. A death by misadventure feels too small for someone as big as Dolores O'Riordan, but sometimes the truth isn't a blockbuster movie plot. It's just a series of unfortunate events on a lonely night in a London hotel. What would her career look like today? She was buzzing with creative energy, working on a new album. The Cranberries eventually finished that project as a final tribute, releasing the album In the End in 2019. Listening to those tracks today is a surreal experience. Hearing her raw demo vocals, knowing she wasn't there to hear the final polished mix, is like receiving a letter from beyond the grave. It was a haunting final gift, a reminder that her voice was a force that couldn't be silenced. Today, Dolores is remembered as more than just a headline. She's a cautionary tale about the pressures of the industry and the nature of mental health, but she also remains a symbol of Irish resilience and artistic purity. She sang from her gut and never apologized for being complex. She paved the way for artists who struggle with their own demons, showing them it's okay to be vulnerable. So, I have to ask, are celebrities underprotected when it comes to mental health? It's a conversation we need to have. Dolores gave us her soul. Her voice will never fade. Thanks for watching.